It's summer 2009. 29-year-old Toni Lee Sharpless is working at Lancaster General Hospital in Pennsylvania. Toni is a nurse, specializing in infectious diseases. She enjoys working as a caretaker immensely, despite the long hours and challenges of the job.
She loved nursing, loved it. I think she liked the challenge of figuring out what was wrong with people and helping them and then seeing them get back on their feet. And she made a lot of friends, patients and other nurses.
When Toni is not at work, she spends most of her time at home, caring for her 12-year-old daughter. Toni became a mother when she was 17 years old. She has always been extremely devoted to raising her child.
When Toni got pregnant, we never really discussed whether she was too young or not. She just said she wanted to keep this child, and she said, I will do anything that I have to do to support this child.
Between being a mother and working full-time, Toni keeps very busy. But Toni didn't always have such a good handle on things.
The first time that Toni had a breakdown, she was approximately 19 years old, 19 or 20. She called me at home. She said, I can't stop crying, Mom. I don't know what's wrong with me. And that's when the first time she had went into the hospital.
Over the next several years, Toni is repeatedly hospitalized. But the doctors are unable to diagnose her condition.
When she would have the crying spells, it could last a day, maybe 3. It was very hard for me as a parent to see her going through this, and I didn't know what to do. She would drink occasionally. I think that was to self-medicate. There was one incident where she totaled her car. After that accident, she was adamant. She said, I will never do that again.
In 2004, during another hospital stay, the source of Toni's problems is finally identified. She is suffering from a bipolar disorder. With a diagnosis in hand, Toni is prescribed medication and she begins to take control of her life. In 2005, she enrolls in nursing school, and she and her daughter move in with her parents in Downingtown, Pennsylvania.
She was working full-time and going to school full-time. She was very determined. If she wanted something, she set a goal, she went for it, and she made sure she completed it.
Toni finds work immediately upon graduation. It seems her darkest days are behind her, until again, she has another relapse.
In March of 2009, she was having like manic attacks and depression. Manic is where the person doesn't sleep. They just constantly go, 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 and they just talk, talk, talk. And then they start to imagine things because they're not getting this proper sleep that they should be getting.
Toni asks her family to take her to a rehabilitation center where she can be treated for her psychiatric problems. Crystal Johns, an old friend of Toni's from high school, also accompanies her.
When I took her to the rehab, I didn't recognize that person. That wasn't a person I was familiar with.
Toni stays at the hospital for 3 weeks, but when she is released, Toni has a new prescription and appears much improved.
Toni's behavior was like night and day from the day that I took her in to literally just a couple weeks later when she came out. You could tell whatever they did in there with the therapy and the proper medication definitely was going to be a huge help for her.
I think that she felt that the doctors had finally got it right. I felt very relieved because I thought, well, now she's on the right track and hopefully this will, stay the same for a long period of time. She was like a whole new person.
But Toni's new treatment plans require some hard changes in her lifestyle.
Because she did like to drink, and you're not supposed to drink on that kind of medication. So in order to avoid going in those types of places, I would just do things with her that were different, that didn't involve that.
Six months after being released from rehab, Toni is back at work. On the morning of Saturday, August 22nd, she finishes a night shift at Lancaster General and stops by her sister Candy's house on her way home.
She came to my house that morning right off of work. She helped me clean and spent some time with my kids. We sat outside on my front porch and was talking for a while. She ended up leaving to go pick up her daughter, get showered and ready. We were all going to go shopping.
Her friend Crystal joins them. She hasn't seen Toni since the night she took her to the hospital.
She seemed like she was back on the ball. She seemed like the Toni I know. Or like I would call her sister Tone Bone. She seemed like the Tone Bone we knew. Like nothing was ever wrong.
The women spend the entire day together catching up. As the evening approaches, Crystal invites Toni to go out with her that night.
While we were shopping, I received a phone call from a friend of mine, Matt Green, and he said he was in the area and would I like to hang out later on that evening. Which I then asked Toni, would you like to join me? Because I wanted to spend time with her as well.
Although Toni hasn't slept since she worked the night before, she excitedly accepts Crystal's invitation.
Oh, she never went to sleep right away. And if she knew she was going to be off that night, she would stay up all day long and then go to sleep that night. She goes, I haven't been out in a long time. So she got dressed, got ready to go, and as she was leaving, she gave me a hug and a kiss.
Her sister Candy is also invited, but she declines the invitation and can't help but feel some concern for her sister.
I was kind of surprised that she was going out because I knew that she was trying to steer clear of clubs, but I knew that she hadn't been out in months, like probably a good half a year at that point, to where, you know, she wanted to go out, have a good time, spend time with her friend, and just go dancing.
I spoke to Matt, and he said he was in Old City at the G Lounge, and we agreed to meet him there since it wasn't too far from where we were.
When Toni and Crystal arrive at the G Lounge, they receive special treatment. Crystal's friend Matt is the brother of Willie Green, a professional basketball player on the Philadelphia 76ers.
When we went to the G Lounge, we got into the VIP. We just had a couple of glasses of champagne and danced. Toni, she was on the dance floor more than I was. We mingled, we met a lot of people, a couple celebrities, and that was it. We had a good time. It was almost like the most perfect night ever. Almost.
As another round of drinks is ordered, Toni doesn't seem to have any trouble keeping up with the others.
We were definitely drinking Don P. I prefer Grey Goose and pineapple. We had a few of them. We took a couple shots the waitresses were bringing around. Toni, she just seemed great. We had such a good time, and that's all we kept talking about, is how fun of a time we were having, and we didn't want it to end, and the time came too quick.
When the club closes at 2 a.m., Willie invites the group to his house in Gladwin, a suburb outside of Philadelphia.
And I discussed it with Toni, and she was like, yeah, because we weren't ready for the night to end, so we decided to go.
At Willie's house, the socializing continues with a drinking game and then a late-night dip in the swimming pool.
Everybody was outside but Toni. When I dove into the pool and I came up, they said, your girlfriend is in there yelling something. So I immediately went into the house and said, what's going on? And I didn't really understand what was wrong with her, but I could tell that her pupils were dilated and that she was very intoxicated. I don't know if it hit her at that moment, but it was definitely time to go. Her behavior had changed.
Crystal tries to calm her friend down, but it seems that a switch has been flipped. Toni becomes very aggressive.
Everybody else came in to see what the commotion was, and that's when the situation just turned crazy. Toni came out and said things and was yelling profanities, and she went inside Mr. Green's basement and slammed the door, kicked the chair, a couple different things. I never seen Toni act this way before. I was embarrassed. I didn't understand why she was acting like this. I didn't know how to handle the situation. I thought the best situation would be to leave.
Crystal says that Willie has also had enough. He asks the two women to go, but Toni insists on driving.
She grabbed the car keys and said, I'm driving. She was telling everybody it's her car and she was driving, and if I wanted to go home, that I would get in the car with her. They asked me, are you sure you want to get in the car with her? And I said, we came together, we leave together.
But once they are in the car, Crystal says that Toni becomes even more irate.
We got maybe 2 houses down the road, and she slammed on the brakes, and she said some things to me in reference that I was laughing with them. I just think the liquor kicked in, and she was just a little paranoid maybe. I don't know exactly what she was thinking at that point. I was confused. I was like, we're going to go home and laugh about it tomorrow, you know? That's what I thought.
But Crystal is unable to calm Toni down. Toni orders her from the car, and Crystal finally gives in.
I just thought, let me get out the car. She'll come back for me.
As soon as Crystal steps outside, Toni speeds away into the darkness.
I never thought she wouldn't come back.
Coming up, what was happening to Toni that night?
The combination of everything may have been making her act not in her right mind.
After a long night out on the town, 29-year-old Toni Lee Sharpless seems to lose control. Her belligerent behavior gets her and her friend Crystal kicked out of a small gathering in Gladwin, Pennsylvania. Crystal is glad to be going home, but suddenly, Toni demands that she exit the car and speeds away.
She knew I didn't know these people, that we were so far from home, like 40 miles. Why would you leave me? I didn't think she was that upset, and especially not at me.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Crystal finds herself in an unfamiliar neighborhood, a long way from home.
I could still see the guys from the party yelling for me to come back, and I was so embarrassed that I just put my hand up and said, I'm fine. I started walking towards the direction that she had went, thinking that she would come back for me. So then I called Toni's phone. She didn't answer, and I called again, and it was obvious that she had turned the phone off. It was scary, it was dark, there's no street lights, and I had no clue exactly where I was. I thought how angry I was. How could she leave me? I don't know. I just hoped that she was going to come back for me. That was the initial feeling.
Crystal continues trying to reach Toni without luck while she walks to the expressway that they took to get there.
I sat on the side of the road, so if she came back, that I would just be sitting waiting for her. I was so far from the development that I left, I didn't even know what house I came out of. That's when the reality kicked in, and that's when I began to cry. I was scared. I was scared for my life.
Crystal is eventually able to reach a nephew who agrees to make the 40-minute drive to come pick her up. On the way home, Crystal tries calling Toni's sister Candy to tell her about their train wreck of a night.
When I got up in the morning and saw that I had missed texts and phone calls, voicemails from her, I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Candy is surprised to hear about Toni's strange behavior. She calls over to her parents' house to make sure her sister is all right. But Toni has not come home.
We thought, well, maybe her being so tired because she had stayed up so long would have pulled the car off the side of the road and taken a nap, but she would have called or texted myself, her sister, or her daughter, and she didn't do any of those.
Candy and Crystal are worried. They know that Toni hadn't slept for over 36 hours and had been drinking. They wonder if it's possible that Toni has had some sort of accident.
I called all the local prisons to see if she happened to get a DUI.
Check with hospitals, things of that nature, see if there was a car accident. Nothing all day. I had tried calling Toni, I had tried texting her, no response. And being a close-knit family, I know she would have called one of us by then. So now, red flags are going up, something's wrong. Where's she at?
By nightfall, neither Candy nor Crystal has made any progress in finding Toni. Crystal can't bear it any longer and contacts the police.
I called the West Brandywine Police Station, spoke to Officer Moore. He informed me that usually a family member calls, and I said, well, her family doesn't want to jump the gun at this time, but something doesn't sit right with me. I was the last person with her. I want to know where she is.
Candy agrees to go down to the police station to file the missing persons report for her sister.
It was nerve-wracking to report her missing. I'm still at this point like, this isn't really happening. Like, I'm doing this for nothing, but if I don't do it and it really is an issue, I would feel terrible. So I just got to file it to be on the safe side. That way we can get the word out and see what's going on.
As Officer Russell Moore takes down Tony's details, some of the information that Candy tells him gives him pause.
She did mention that Toni had had a couple cases of where she had attempted suicide, which did concern me that this could be another attempt.
Tony's family, however, stresses that Toni loves her life and has no reason to want to end it.
She's trying to further her education. She has a daughter to come home to. We're a very close family.
She was happy. She loved her job, and things were going good, and her medicine was working well, so she was very excited.
Still, Officer Moore wonders how the mix of alcohol with Tony's medication may have affected her.
There is some concern that the alcohol with the medication, as well as her mental health issues, the combination of everything may have been making her act not in her right mind.
Crystal is also worried. As she replays the last night over in her head, she realizes she has seen Toni in this condition once before.
The night reminded me of the time when we were checking her into rehab. She wasn't in a right state of mind. I know that Toni wasn't psychologically stable, that she had issues with that in the past, and, maybe I should have kept a closer eye on her. Maybe I shouldn't have drunk with her, But her family was aware we were going out. We went there before we left. Obviously, if we're going to a club, we're going to consume some alcohol. If that wasn't a good idea, I wish somebody would have told me. I would have babysat her more, I would try to.
Officer Moore enters Toni's personal data and vehicle description into the National Crime Information Center database. He also contacts the Lower Merion Police Department, whose jurisdiction includes Gladwin, where Toni was last seen.
Typically, the car would have been the greatest link for us in an investigation like this. If anybody stopped that car, we would have been notified, and West Brandywine would have been notified.
But Toni's car seems to have vanished just as she has. Police turn next to Toni's phone records.
I called Toni's cell phone carrier. The last contact with the cell phone tower was at 4:53 in the morning. The cell phone tower itself services Lower Merion, where she went missing. After that, we cannot tell where she would have gone.
But Officer Moore is able to identify the last time Toni used her phone, 2:57 a.m., when Toni was leaving the nightclub and on her way to Willie Green's house. It's a text message from Toni to her daughter, who had contacted her mother when she could not fall asleep.
The last thing that came off of my daughter's Toni's phone was a text to her daughter at 3 o'clock in the morning, because her daughter couldn't sleep that night. Her mom said to her, "Honey, I'll be home soon, get some sleep." That was the last text, the last activity on that phone.
For Donna, Toni's last text message sounds more like the daughter she knows, a loving mother who is very responsible and caring. But everything else she learns about Toni's behavior that night leaves her baffled.
I couldn't believe it. I've never seen her act that way. Never. The only thing I could have thought was mixing alcohol with medication that she was on and lack of sleep.
With this in mind, Donna and her husband Peter begin driving the roads around the area where Toni was last seen.
I kept thinking, if she's that tired or if she's that out of it, she would have had to have wrecked that car. There's no way she could have made it home or anywhere else. We were looking for all kinds of signs, scraped guardrail, We were looking for like broken branches where a car might have went down, you know, in between trees and stuff. We were all over that area, but we couldn't find anything.
But when Donna and Peter study a map of the area, they are struck by something. Toni could have taken a wrong turn looking for the expressway entrance heading home.
Leaving Gladwin area, it only takes you into Philadelphia. You have to go off the next exit, turn around, and come back. So we thought, well, instead of that, we'll just go down under the bridge, and that's where the river happens to be. You make a sharp left, and then the park is off to the right. And that's what made me think, well, if she had pulled in there, she could have went right off the boat ramp and into the water.
Coming up, have her parents finally located Toni?
If she's in the river, then she's not alive anymore. If she's not in the river, then we still don't know what happened to her. It was a lose-lose situation at that point.
"29-year-old nurse and mother Toni Lee Sharpless is missing. Overtired and operating under a dangerous mix of bipolar medication and alcohol, Toni was last seen in Gladwin, a suburb of Philadelphia that she is unfamiliar with. Her family fears that in her altered state, Toni may have driven into the Schuylkill River.
We decided the Schuylkill River needed to be searched because that was the closest place to Willie Green's home. If my daughter left there and went down to park the car, she could have went into the boat ramp because it was like approximately 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark. And when you're looking at water and a road and they run together, you can't tell the difference between the two of them.
When Toni's mother tells the police about her theory, they agree that the area can be very disorienting, especially at night.
Anybody who's not familiar with that section of the township, the Gladwin area, could very easily get turned around and lost, because while it is a residential area, it is heavily wooded. There's no sidewalks, and there's not a whole lot of street lights.
They also agree that the location is very isolated. If Toni had driven into the river, there would most certainly have been no witnesses.
The area is fairly desolate at night. The boat ramp is not meant to be used after sundown, so there is no reason for anybody to be down there.
However, the authorities feel that there is not enough probable cause to warrant a river search.
Our officers went down to the river and checked to see if there's any indication whatsoever of a vehicle going into the river, and we didn't find any.
Nevertheless, Texas EquiSearch, a nonprofit organization that conducts missing person searches, agrees to come to Pennsylvania to spearhead the operation. They scan the river bottom with sonar, while the Lower Merion Police Department joins the search.
The way the sonar system works is it's attached to a boat, and it scans through the water and actually takes photographs of items on the bottom of the river or on the riverbed.
As you go off the boat ramp, it gets very deep. It's about 25 feet deep as soon as you leave the boat ramp. So this is a fairly deep water operation there with very low visibility.
Despite the depth and murky water, sonar hits upon what looks like 3 cars at the bottom of the river.
We arranged for the Philadelphia dive unit to come out the next morning and to dive and to determine if they were vehicles and if they were involved, in this case, if they were in fact Toni's car.
While Donna is happy that the search is being conducted, she cannot bring herself to be there.
When they had said there were cars in there, my heart was pounding. I was home, pacing the floor. I was pacing the floor, my husband and I both.
Toni's sister Candy, however, is there, steeling herself for whatever they find.
It was kind of nerve-wracking because it was a lose-lose situation at that point. If she's in the river, then she's not alive anymore. If she's not in the river, then we still don't know what happened to her.
Before the dive team begins their work, investigators go over the river with a second, more advanced sonar. They discover much more than they had bargained for.
The total number of vehicles that were found in our section of the river was 11.
According to the police, The remoteness of the boat ramp makes it a popular spot to get rid of stolen and other unwanted vehicles.
What the dive team did was they went into the water there, and they would be able to, on a close-up view, take a look at the vehicles and get a basic description of them. In some cases, if there was a vehicle registration plate still attached, they would remove the plate and return it to us once they got out of the water. That's what happened in this case.
As the divers work to identify the sunken cars, Toni's loved ones wait on pins and needles on shore.
As they found the vehicles, they were letting me know that they weren't hers, but there were still one or two towards the end that they weren't for sure about, that they had to come back and double check on. The plan of action was to get them out of there, to get them identified for sure, because even if they pulled the tag off, what if the tag was changed at that point?
Candy must wait another week for her peace of mind. The weight of the water and silt collected in the submerged vehicles makes extracting them a tricky operation. A large tow truck with a boom extending over the water is needed to do the job.
Watching several cars being drug out of the river, every car was like, I hope it's not hers.
9 vehicles are eventually removed from the Schuylkill River, none of them belonging to Toni. Although her loved ones are relieved, the conclusion of the river search without any new information to Toni's whereabouts increases their fear.
When you have that special person in your life that's missing, you feel like you're in a black hole. You can't touch the sides. You're falling and falling. There's no bottom and there's no top. You can't see, but you just continue to fall and your heart just sinks.
Coming up, police turn their attention to the last person to have seen Toni.
Everybody was asking me about drugs and what drugs was she on, and I don't do drugs. And if she was on any drugs, I didn't know of them.
Get more Disappeared online at investigationdiscovery.com. When Toni Lee Sharpless goes missing outside of Philadelphia, her loved ones are stunned. The 29-year-old nurse lives a simple life, devoted to her daughter. But by all reports, Toni behaved like a different person on the night she disappeared.
She wasn't herself, because the Toni I know would have never left me on a dark road or with a house full of strangers. She wouldn't have did that.
Crystal Johns is the last person known to have seen Toni. That night, the two women had last been at the house of Willie Green, a professional basketball player on the Philadelphia 76ers.
I contacted Mr. Willie Green to see if he could shed some light on what happened. Mr. Green gave the same account of the night that Miss Johns had given.
There were never any suspects in the case. There was never any indication of foul play. There was no person of interest, really, that jumped out at us during any phase of the investigation.
Despite Willie and Crystal's cooperation with authorities, rumors of foul play begin to circulate.
Toni's disappearance received a lot of local media coverage, both on TV and also on the internet. And unfortunately, in some of this coverage, Crystal was described or was portrayed to be someone who was hiding something or who was involved in something happening to her friend.
The blog just said that me and the Greens disposed of Toni, that I'm withholding information, all types of stuff that was not true. It was almost like harassment. The one person that wants to find her friend and that took it serious from day one is being harassed.
After several weeks of negative attention, Crystal calls the Lower Merion Police Department and requests to take a polygraph test.
Crystal asked to take a polygraph. We were fairly convinced that her information was accurate. However, she wanted to do it because there was so much pressure on her that she may have had something to do with Toni's disappearance.
I passed with flying colors. I passed. I didn't lie about anything. There's nothing I withheld at all. And I went and I got something to eat for the first time in a very long time. I finally had my appetite back.
Toni Lee Sharpless has been missing for 3 weeks. After extensive searching and interviews, all leads grow cold until suddenly there's movement in the case.
On September 14th, 2009, I was contacted by the New Jersey State Police that on September 8th, their vehicle had recorded Toni Sharpless's car in the city of Camden.
Camden, New Jersey lies directly across the river from Philadelphia. It's only a 20-minute drive from where Toni was last seen.
It was the first information we had since Toni went missing that she and her car was moving. It was in the area. It was somewhere.
According to the Camden Police Department, Toni's car was recorded by a piece of technology called a license plate reader.
The license plate reader is a police vehicle that's equipped with a camera system that automatically runs vehicle registration plates through the computer system. It runs every tag that it passes, that it captures on this video system.
But the reader that recorded Toni's license plate number was in an unmanned vehicle.
If there's a police officer in the vehicle at the time that a vehicle registration plate is hit upon, there's an alarm in the vehicle, and the police officer would know then to look for this vehicle. Unfortunately, in Toni's case, the registration plate that was read, it happened at a time that the police vehicle was parked. So the information didn't come forth for several days.
To make up for lost time, the Lower Merion Police Department get right to work pursuing the lead.
What we did was we joined forces with Camden Police Department and the New Jersey State Police, and they conducted citywide searches for that car, particularly concentrated in that area.
For Toni's family, the development in Camden, a city known for its high crime areas, makes them very uneasy.
When I heard that her car was spotted in Camden, I knew something was definitely wrong. We had recently went to a concert in Camden, and she just wanted to get out of there because we know it's not a good area.
It told me that either she wasn't in that car, or if she was, she may have been in the trunk of the car, because she would never go to Camden on her own, not willingly anyway.
While friends and family believe that Toni has almost certainly met with foul play, the authorities quietly develop a second theory.
It was reported to us that Toni may have had an addiction problem earlier in her life. The fact that her license plate was read in Camden worried us, because if you knew where to buy drugs, that would be one of the areas to go.
But police are unable to determine if Toni has bought drugs in Camden before.
Everybody was asking me about drugs and what drugs was she on, and I don't do drugs. And if she was on any drugs, I didn't know of them, and I would definitely volunteer that information.
As a result of the investigation, we certainly became aware of almost all aspects of Toni's life.
I was told through her family and through her friends that Toni did have a history of drug abuse. Yes, the area where the car was seen, high prostitution, high heroin.
She suffered with some past demons, but as of the time of the incident, it appeared that she had had her life in order.
As the Camden lead goes nowhere, and no new information surfaces, the search for Toni Lee Sharpless begins to stall.
It is very hard in a case like this. There's very little information here. I mean, really what we have is a girl left the township at 5 o'clock in the morning, drunk and angry, and was last seen by her friend. And the car, we believe, was in Camden several days later.
Across town, a private investigator hears Toni's case on the news for the first time and has a strong premonition.
For what it's worth, I got a flash of something and I yelled at the television. She's very much alive.
Coming up, a new theory about Toni's whereabouts generates hope and fear.
I know it's far-fetched to a lot of people, but in my world, that happens all the time.
It's been a month since Toni Lee Sharpless drove away from a gathering in Gladwin, Pennsylvania. The only clue in the case that has surfaced is a license plate hit in Camden, New Jersey. After that, both Toni and her vehicle appear to have vanished. But now, private investigator Eileen Law thinks she knows what has happened to Toni.
My instinct told me that, one, that she was alive, and two, that drugs were involved somehow.
Like many in the area, Eileen is aware of the recent bust of a sex trafficking ring in New Jersey.
Prosecutors say this man, who called himself Prince, enslaved young women and forced them into a life of hell.
Just 1 month earlier, Alan E. Brown Jr. was arrested for prostituting dozens of young women from Newark to Atlantic City.
This man is one of thousands of men all across the country who prey upon young women, anywhere from 12 to 50. And what they do is go to bus stations, train stations, nightclubs, and look for young women who seem distressed in some way.
Once they were forced into his stable of prostitutes, they were subjected to beatings, to isolation from others, to coercion. They were locked inside apartments.
He would take their cell phones and their credit cards and force drugs on them. I know it's far-fetched to a lot of people, but in my world, that happens all the time.
Although Eileen believes that Toni may have fallen victim to this type of crime, she has no facts to support her hunch. It is only when she meets Toni's family for the first time that she realizes how right she may be.
My daughter Candy and I went to meet with her. She had asked me just basic questions like the police did.
It was a lot of paperwork, a lot of questioning. Where was she last seen? What was she driving? When was the missing persons report filed?
Almost immediately, Eileen learns of several details that confirm her fears.
When Toni left that night with her friend, she had less than a quarter of a tank of gas. So when you do the mileage, there's just no way that she would be able to get home. I believe that somewhere along the expressway in Philadelphia, she ran out of gas. And that was the beginning of the end.
At the conclusion of her first meeting with Donna and Candy, Eileen offers her services to find Toni for free. She begins work right away to get the story of the missing nurse and mother back into the media.
I believe that she is in a weakened state. We need to get her picture out there.
Almost immediately, there are sightings of women believed to be Toni.
When that aired, by the time I got back to the office, there was a flood of calls. The first sightings were in the city of Lancaster, where Toni was a nurse at Lancaster General Hospital, and a lot of them used the phrase that she was distraught or distressed.
As Eileen follows up each lead, Toni's family waits anxiously, wondering if Toni has really been found.
There was one sighting in particular that got me anxious in Lancaster County, and that's one where the person was almost sure it was her to the point he wanted to get off the bus and go grab her. And the description of her, the description of the clothes, everything matched.
But none of the sightings lead to Toni. After 1 week, the calls from Lancaster stop. Then, another call comes in.
I got a call from a man, and he said that he drove trucks to Camden, New Jersey, and he said that he believed he saw Toni.
Over the next 3 days, there are several more reports of sightings in Camden. Because Toni's car was also seen there, Eileen thinks the chances of finding her are high. But the landscape of the area makes searching for Toni difficult.
There's a big drug trade in the city of Camden. There are sexual favors that you'll see happen right in alleys in broad daylight. You'll see drugs change hands. You'll see pimps watching very carefully, and you'll see some of the girls get very nervous about talking with me.
Toni's friend Crystal helps out with the search as well.
We went to Camden and was handing out flyers. A lot of the girls there, after a few weeks of prostitution and drugs, they probably are unrecognizable to their own family members. It's that bad.
Eileen and Crystal speak to dozens of people, but no one can definitively prove that Toni is there. Then, just as they did in Lancaster, the sightings stop and begin a week later elsewhere.
There were a couple sightings in Philadelphia. Same thing. It was always, there was a cluster up here, and then it would stop for a couple days. Many of the sightings of Toni described her being with a man, and it told me that someone was moving Toni around.
While Eileen feels strongly that Toni may be the victim of sex trafficking, the authorities on the case see it differently.
While that exists in places in this country, certainly the rarity in this area, and we never had any indication that that was a viable angle for this investigation to take.
But with little else to go on, Toni's loved ones can't help but take the theory seriously.
I think it's a strong possibility. I really do. It's real. It's in America and it's here. It's not good. It's not good. Whatever happened to my friend is not good.
I think that she is a very strong person. She's a fighter. She's a leader, and that if she had the opportunity to get away, she would do that.
Although Toni's loved ones want to believe she is alive, the possibility gives them little comfort.
If Toni did drive 176, which went into Camden, she could have got carjacked, been drugged up, held for prostitution. We don't know at this point, but that's our theories. I keep thinking, is she okay? Is she in her right mind? Is she cold? Is she hot? Is she hungry? Is she tired? Is she sleeping right? Because I don't know where she's at. It's such an empty feeling. It's hard to describe.